G'day folks, welcome back. Firstly, apologies, there was no video last week. We had a week's worth of wet weather, which makes it very difficult to get out onto the farm to do stuff, but also makes it quite difficult to film what we are doing. So back into it this week. We've got overcast, periods of sunshine. I do believe that the rain is coming back in again. So now we're trying to get some bits and pieces done. Ian has managed to go round and catch up on the mowing before the next rain event, and also put out some chuck manure on the jackfruit trees. But we had a question come in a couple of weeks ago asking if we could go through the steps when planting out our trees, and if we could also talk a little bit about water management. So that's what I am about to do in this video. Okay, so before we get to the planting stage, let's go back a few steps and talk about the seedling stage and growing on your seedlings. This is assuming that you are growing your own seedlings like we do from our jackfruit seeds. So it's really important that you think about how long your seedlings are going to be in their pots for, because you want to avoid your seedlings from becoming root bound, which is where your roots will just start to spiral the pot, because they've got nowhere else to escape to. And you really don't want to be planting that out into your paddock, because they will just continue to follow that spiral pattern. So we want to avoid root bound seedlings. So for us, if we're planning on putting our seedlings out into the farm relatively quickly, so 3 to 4 weeks, which is ideally what we want to do because we want to field graft if we can, then we will use these, which are the biodegradable pots we've spoken about in previous videos. As you can see, these are only small pots, so we really don't want to keep the seedlings in here for a long period of time. 3 to 4 weeks is probably the maximum time you'd want to keep your seedlings in here. They do have the benefit that the roots will easily penetrate through the pot, and you can directly plant this out into your farm without having to disturb the root system too much. So that's the good thing about them. If we're planning on holding onto the seedlings for a little bit longer than that, so say 3 to 4 months, then we will look at something like the olive pots. So you can see that these are a lot taller and will allow for more root development. But again, the risk with these is that if you leave them too long, then you might get that root bound of your seedling. Longer term solution is what you can see here, and the reason that we've got some of our seedlings in these pots is because we are wanting to nursery graft these seedlings. That means that we need to grow them on beyond the 3 to 4 months, because we need the stems to become thick enough to graft onto. And then when we have grafted, hopefully successfully, we then need to grow that graft on in the nursery. So we need to go for a larger pot. And you can see with these ones that they have all of these little holes, and the actual pot is shaped, so it's quite corrugated. And what this does is sort of directs the roots in the right direction, so that when they do come out of these little holes, they'll get air pruned. I think these pots hold about 5 litres. You'll also notice that we keep our pots on mesh. So this is all wire mesh. And again, this is because we want to encourage air pruning of any roots that might come out. Now, in terms of watering, that's going to be heavily dependent on your environment. So for us here, certainly in the cooler months and when it's overcast, we have to water a lot less because the soil will stay quite damp. As opposed to if it was really hot and then your pots might dry out a bit quicker. So it's really important that you're frequently just checking and watering as you need to. So feel your soil, feel what it's like, because you don't want to overwater, but you don't want them to dry out either. And with regards to that, as you can see in our nursery here, we've got all the same sized pots. So they're all under the same conditions. Whereas if we were to use a mixture of these pots and these pots and these pots, it goes without saying that these are going to dry out a lot faster than what these are. So when you've got a nursery with mixed pots, you've got to be very, very careful, because what suits one is not going to suit the other. And then you are at risk of either drying out or overwatering. This nursery does have overhead sprinklers. It also has a clear PVC roof and shade cloth. So in this situation, we control the watering. That's very different to our shade tunnel, which also has overhead sprinklers, but because that's made out of shade cloth, it will also get any rainfall. So we have less control over watering there than we do in here. Now, when it comes to planting out, you might want to sun harden your seedlings first before you plant out into open space. So for us, we use the shade tunnel because that's only 30% weave. So when we come to plant our seedlings out, they're already pretty sun hardened. But you need to think about where your seedlings are coming out from. If you've got your seedlings under heavy shade and then you're putting them out into direct sunshine, then they're going to be more susceptible to transplant shock. Also think about the timing. So when are you planning on putting your seedlings out into your farm or garden? For us here in the tropics, we try and wait for winter, because obviously in the winter months for us, it's a lot cooler. The sun isn't quite as intense as the summer months, and the fact that it's cooler and the fact that the sun is less intense helps to keep the ground cooler and helps to keep it damp for longer. So you've got a much better chance of your seedlings settling in, and obviously it's easier for us to plant out in the winter than it is in the really hot summer months in the tropics. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about your soil texture. And this is really important when you come to plant out your trees and seedlings. So if you are about to plant out in periods of heavy rainfall or directly after heavy rainfall, the problem there is that your soil can turn into almost like paste, mud, and it's very difficult with soil like that to be able to crumble it nicely and backfill your seedling. Alternatively, if you're planting out and you've had long periods of dry, intense sunlight, then your soil can be really dry and hard like concrete, and again, very difficult to backfill successfully around your plant. So in the winter months for us, we want to be looking for nice, loamy, crumbly soil. Stumpy, are you helping? Yes, that's helping. Good boy. He's trying to dig holes for me. Stump, come on, we're trying to film. Okay, so this is what we want our soil to look like when we're backfilling our holes. Nice and crumbly, fine particles. So this is not muddy soil that's like glue. It's not dry and hard as concrete turning to powder. It's just crumbling away. This is beautiful soil to be backfilling your new seedlings with. Okay, so now I've dug my hole, ready to plant my seedling. Now we don't actually have any jackfruit seedlings to plant out right now, so you're just going to have to use your imagination. But I am going to use this olive pot just to demonstrate. What we want when we dig the hole is that we want the hole to be twice as wide as the plant that we're putting in there. And the reason for that is because we want enough room to be able to backfill with our lovely soil. And also the fact that this is all broken down and crumbly will allow those roots to start and easily penetrate into the native surrounding soil. So twice as wide, but we only want the hole to be as deep as the root ball that we're planting. So we don't want to go too deep and then end up with the soil coming above the root flare. And I'll pop a picture in of what I mean by root flare. Because we don't want to encourage collar rot. So the level of the plant in your pot where the root flare is what you want to see when you plant into the ground. If you have gone too deep, you can always backfill with some of your soil. So when we are planting out, a little tip for you guys, and what we often do is bring down an empty pot of whatever size it is that we're planting. When we've done our hole, we'll use the empty plant pot first just to see, are we at the right width and are we at the right height before we then go to plant our seedling. When we go to plant our seedling, we'll use our hand, make sure that we've gone around and secured the seedling itself with our fingers, and then we'll invert the pot and gently loosen out. And then you want to make sure that you put your plant in with minimal disturbance to your root ball. So once our little seedling is nicely in place, we'll come around and give it a really good watering in with sea salt. Sea salt is a seaweed solution and helps to prevent transplant shock with your seedlings. So give it a good watering in with some sea salt, and that will also allow any large air pockets to rise. So you may see when you water in, bubbles starting to come up. That's large air pockets from when you've been backfilling coming up to the surface. A good watering in will also help then to settle all the soil around your newly planted seedling. Now in terms of fertilizer, we will give our seedlings some chicken manure, because that's a more gentle fertilizer that's more gentle on the roots of your seedling. Now another little tip when you're planting out your seedlings is to just use a fork like this. This is what we do, especially for the smaller pots. And when you've planted, just go around and just gently pop your fork in and just loosen the surrounding soil. You only want to see it move just a little bit, and this is just going to start to break up just gently the surrounding soil, which is going to encourage your roots to start feeding out into your surrounding area and not stay trapped in the little bit that you have backfilled. When you're planting your seedlings out, if you notice that your hole has very smooth lines because you've used a spade or a shovel, you can also score the edges of that too, to allow roots to penetrate. We don't tend to find that with ours because our soil is already quite crumbly, but sometimes you will see those smooth lines, so you can always score that. When you finish planting your seedling, you've watered it in and you've fertilized it. You might need to stake it, especially if you are in an area where you're quite susceptible to windy days. You might need to stake your seedling, and also think about any pest protection that you might need to put in place. We use these cages on all of our young seedlings because we have bandicoots living in the area, and bandicoots will come and dig around and potentially uproot the plants. We also have wallabies that like to snack on the leaves, so we have to put these cages in. So think about any protection you might need for your seedlings. Okay, now the final step, and this is really important, is to mulch around your seedlings, and we will always do this. So you can see here we've mulched around this seedling, and just look at that. The mulch is really beneficial because it's going to protect your topsoil. It's going to reduce evaporation. so you won't have to water as much. It's going to keep the soil underneath nice and cool, so you're keeping the roots of your seedling cool and nice and damp. And obviously the long-term benefits of mulching is that all of this is going to break down into lovely organic matter. It's going to encourage microbial activity and fungi, and that in turn gives nutrients to your plants and trees. So the mulch really forms a lovely symbiotic relationship with the roots of your trees. So we're at one of our freestanding jackfruit trees now, and we just want to show you the mulching. So you will have seen in our other videos that we chip all of our prunings back onto the rows, and when Ian mows, all of the grass clippings are also thrown onto the rows. He's come round and fertilized with the chalk manure recently, and this is our lovely mulch. Now under here it is so cool and damp, and you can see there's little earthworms everywhere. Lots of lovely organic matter. And can you see here? These are all the feeder roots from the tree. So as well as wanting a really good taproot on our jackfruit trees, because the taproot is going to help to stabilize the tree and protect it from high winds. We live in a cyclone prone area, so that's really important to us. We also want to encourage all of these shallow roots as well to spread out far and wide and help to stabilize our tree. All of this mulch is like creating a forest floor for your trees, and when you walk on it, it's almost spongy. It smells so good, and there is so much activity going on in here that you probably won't see on the video, but lots of little bugs, lots of earthworms, and the earthworms creating their channels will also help with good drainage. But just beautiful. The benefits of mulch, so amazing. Lots of organic matter, lots of nutrients to feed your tree roots. So hopefully that answered some of the questions that we've been having, but if we missed anything or anybody has any other suggestions or questions, then leave a comment down below and we'll see you on the next one. Bye!